Welcome to Session 1, Part 2 of Introduction to Modern Application Development. We have now begun to change over our CGI wrapper app into a proper GUI app, and as a part of that, we saw last time that we studied these types of things. We looked at, for example, how the architecture changed across the three systems, and then we said that we are going to study the internals of the servlet, after which we looked at the demos that Tomcat's built-in servlets give us. Now we will take a look at the next step of how to make a GUI app out of our CGI app. And as part of this, let's go back a little bit and look at some of the slides from our GUI demo. And after that, we will see how to replicate its properties inside the server now. So here we have our GUI, and we saw that there is a register button, and the register button in our example acts somewhat like login. It then displays the name of the current user, and it provides identity and context for the other commands and enables further actions. This notion of a single application started, which shows you a user interface and you work in its current identity, is exactly like how we log into our systems. And so on a per application basis, you can have a similar idea, which is known as sessions. So our toy example was that if the current user is known, then report can use that information directly to craft the output in a readable way, and that it is implicit who is using the application. So that's the part that we are going to replicate this time. And the difficulty with that is this notion that HTTP, the protocol that connects the browser to the server, is what is known as a stateless protocol. So here is what we mean by stateless. Let's show in our demo what the problem is. So first we are going to look at our Apache system, and in Apache we are going to look at what is contained in the standard apps that we are familiar with. So let's wait a minute for these ports to show up, and in the meantime we can get ready to execute some of our fair share applications. I guess Apache has not started yet. That's good. Let's see if we can start it. Okay, it started now. So sometimes you have to do the start-stop cycles yourself, because the last time it was shut down, something was improper. This is very common, and it happens in real server systems as well. And from time to time, you have to take actions to make this startup happen properly. Usually the issue is that the process ID, you want only one server to start, and so that is recorded in what is called a PID file. Let's just take a look at what that is like. So let us go look at our XAMPP Apache. If you look at this directory, what you will often find is that in some place like logs, there is this thing called HTTP PID. So if you look at it, this process ID is stored here in a file, and its content is 8232, which is the process ID that you see here. This is the process ID of what is called the main process of Apache, and the actual work is done largely by this second process, which is 18272, and the top process acts as a supervisor. Exactly what this architecture is, we will be talking about later. But for now, this failure to start gave us an opportunity to explain this particular problem. Alright, so with that, let's look at our explanation for, so this is our system. We have register F1 and we put something there, doesn't really matter. I'll just put end right away. And I will have here control shift, whatever is it called, web developer tools, and we have toggle tools, control shift I. Okay, so let's do our usual thing. We will submit a form, and here we have, for example, this post request. The interesting thing about this post request is that if you look at the contents of the post request, then all of these, starting with the URL and all these kinds of parameters, plus this body parameter, they are all from the particular interaction we have had. That is, every single piece of information that we are sending across to the server is something that the server can see directly or get directly from the single page that we are working with. However, suppose that in this case it was like our GUI system where the interaction looked more like this one. Then after you press a register button, another screen is supposed to show up, but then that screen does not have any way to remember where it came from. Do you see what the issue is? If every single piece of data that went to the server is only data that is available from the page when you used it, then there is no way to remember that the thing we are working in is a sequence of multiple pages. And this is essentially the issue that GUIs solve. For example, in this case, what we said is, it is implicit who is using the application. But in this particular screen, the user came from the previous screen when we used register. Yet, the next page remembers who the current user is and uses that information. This idea of remembering some information across sessions is necessary in order to create the notion of session. And once you can remember information over multiple screens, you can start using it for all sorts of things, not just for the idea of a session. So this method of having some information that is remembered is what is called a cookie, which is a well-known word to all of us who have used the web. And a specific kind of cookie is known as a session. So to get an idea of what those things are, we will look at Tomcat, which had nicely given us both the applications that we discussed last time, which showed us things like cookies and sessions and whatnot. So let's go back to XAMPP and start Tomcat. So let's see, so far Tomcat ought to be running. Okay, it said status change detected, running. So things are working. There is no PID related debugging that we need to do. Good. Let's go back to so when I was switching these windows, this particular window popped up. When you start Tomcat, the information about its start is given in windows like this. So here what it says is it looks for some kind of a JRE, JDK, etc. It finds one, and then when it finds one, it starts executing and it is giving us some information. See, none of this matters so much because our startup was successful, but you should always look up these kinds of displays to see if instead of info, which is a sign that everything is okay, do we have things like warning. And once you start looking, you will notice such things. So here we have a warning. It says that creation of secure random instance, etc. took whatever milliseconds. Now this one, I would have to do exactly what you might imagine you would have to do, which is copy this thing and go look up on the web what this means. My guess is that it probably should have taken a little less or something. I don't really know why, but we don't want to get distracted with all that right now. The main thing is that in production applications, you will often see logs which have many warnings spuriously lying around, and people simply don't have the time to look at those. So those kinds of things, if you have a culture in your work that you keep an eye on these kinds of things as they are happening, then it is much easier to keep tabs on them. It's far harder, of course, to start paying attention when you are in the middle of developing an app, because a warning, of course, nothing really happens for some time, so it's easy to simply ignore it. Okay, so with that, let's minimize this away and let's go to our Tomcat, which is at localhost 8080. Okay. And like we saw last time, we have a manager app and we have given a password of manager in the previous session. We saw that that kind of information is available in Tomcat conf Tomcat users.xml. So Tomcat users had this manager and password that we entered last time. Okay. So here is what we are going to look at this time. We just explained that the fact that HTTP is stateless means that from one page to another, imagine there is a sequence of pages, and each time you go from one page to another based on solely the information present in the page before, then there is no simple way to generate some sort of information which persists across that entire series of pages. But when we have an application, we do need to remember pieces like this. So let's see how that gets done. So here we have these servlet examples, and from the servlet examples we can look at this one, which is the cookies example. And let's see what this example looks like when we perform a request. So here goes. So here we first see a get, and in this thing all the information, if you look, came directly from the page before, and this time there is no request body or anything for a get. So this is what we have so far. Now what this app allows us to do is this. Let us say we are going to create a cookie called C1 whose value is this is my first cookie. Alright, so it says here your browser currently isn't sending cookies. Create a cookie to send to your browser, and when we submit this query, what we have is something interesting. So on the way forward, we have these familiar headers. There is nothing new, refer, upgrade, etc. But when coming back, the response this time, it has this header called set cookie. And the set cookie header is where the server tells the browser that you should be setting this cookie. So look at how this interaction is happening. In this particular application, we are telling the server what cookie to set, and it is setting that. Of course, that is not how cookies normally get set. Cookies will normally get set automatically by the server itself, but it still uses this same header. It uses the header set cookie, and if you look at this thing, there is a, you can see, look at it raw. So this is what it looks like as far as the raw header is concerned. There is C1 equals, this is my first cookie, and then this is the path which says that out of the parts of the URL, this cookie applies to anything that has examples in it. So what that means is, see, here it is now able to tell us that you just sent the following cookie. But if you look at some example, for instance, this one, just servlets, then wait a minute, I need to start a new one of these guys. Let me start this. So remember the sequence. We went to the cookie example, we did something over here, then we came back and we started a watcher at this point, and now we are going to execute servlet examples over here. Let's see what happens. So here we have servlets, which is under examples, and as a result something interesting happens. See, look here. This time the browser is sending a new header which contains the cookie that was set on this page. So from now on, all interactions with this browser that happen under examples will automatically get this particular cookie in the request. So now what this is telling the server effectively is that, look, I interacted with you once, you sent me something which says set cookie, then I got that back, and now I'm going to remember it, and for the future requests I am now going to send you this cookie, provided the thing is under examples. So as a way to show you something different, let's take a look at this this page, and again we will have to start our manager, Control-Shift-I, and now if I go to a completely different page like this with manager, you have to do it in the same page, otherwise it doesn't record that. Okay, so we did this server status. Here if you see, there is no cookie getting sent. That was a cookie generated by us. Instead, we have a different cookie, and this time this cookie is generated by the manager status application. So because the path of the URL here is different, you have a cookie associated with that we got. And if we want to see where the cookie got set, one of the things you can do is that you can go here and you can go to options, then you can go to privacy and security. You can look at, for instance, manage data, and here you will see cookies that are set for by localhost. And this time what we will do is we will remove this. Looks like there was something involving double click that we will change, and it's asking us whether we should remove it, and indeed we can remove it. And this time if I just refresh this page, let's just do it properly, then if I reload this page, for example, if I look now, because I have removed this cookie header, there is no cookie header getting generated right now. On the other hand, let's see if I can go here and reload. That's interesting. I was expecting to see a session ID cookie, but I guess not. I think it only has a session ID cookie if you do the request from here. That's interesting. All right, let's see what we get. The session ID cookie must have been left from somewhere else. Okay, so this is one of those cases where you get some mysterious interaction that I actually did not expect to see, but you got a chance to see how you can figure out where the cookie is getting set. And so far, maybe it was something left over from my earlier interactions with the manager, but this time I can't seem to easily recreate it, but we don't want to get distracted by that right now. So let's go back to our original thing, where for every interaction we have with this thing, we will see a cookie, and let's verify once more. So here what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask to set another cookie, C2, second cookie, and submit the query. Here what we will see is, see here, we have this request. We removed everything from the original cookie by going into that options page here. So the earlier cookie was destroyed, and now I'm getting a second cookie on this path. Let's now create a third cookie. And let's submit this query. Let's see what we get. So here is what we see. Second time round, I'm setting a new cookie, second cookie, and in turn it is telling me that you should also set a third cookie this time. And indeed, that cookie, so currently this is telling you your browser is sending the following cookie, and we just asked to create another. So let's do fourth cookie. And so now we are sending two cookies and getting back yet another one. So here we have two cookies we are sending, C2 and C3, and we are getting one cookie back, which is the fourth cookie that we asked to send. Now let's just submit nothing. And what we see is, in this case, the application gets confused because you haven't given a particular cookie to set, and it's telling us that the name may not be null or zero length. That does not matter, of course, to the cookies we already have. So just to be clear, it's only the new cookie that we sent as empty. It is giving us this illegal argument exception, but the old cookies that we had already set are properly getting sent as usual. Okay, so this is how a browser manages to send so much information across these kinds of things. When you are experimenting with things like cookies, one useful thing you can try is to create a private window, because in private windows you do not store the information that goes with them. And if we look at even something basic like Google's site, what you will see is, first of all, of course, that it makes a very large number of requests that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and these things will usually contain some cookie or the other. From the names of the cookies, you can sometimes figure out what is going on. and then this 1p jar, don't know what that is exactly, but it's storing some information, and inside this there is another interesting looking string that is getting stored for these requests. So another request went, it's called desktop search sprites. Another one went, looks like there was a post request as well. All of these contain the same number of cookies across all of them. So these cookies are what is used by these web companies to correlate your activity, say throughout a day or throughout a month or what have you, which is one reason why from time to time your cookies need to be cleaned, and you can get these extensions which do things like cookie cleaning for you on part of the browser, so that you do not get tracked, for years together, and some of these cookies will stay that way and get refreshed and so on far more times than you might imagine. So now that this is in a private version of the browser, I don't have to worry about it because I close this and the whole thing is gone. All right. Now, okay, so that was the deal about cookies. The next interesting thing that we have to see is the idea called a session. And for the session as well, let's track everything that happens. So we will execute the session, and what it is telling us is this. So first of all, the minute you visit this session, it generates an ID and it shows that ID to you. And let's see where this ID is. So here, if you see, it gets this session ID information actually from a cookie which is set by the server. So what this cookie is telling our browser is that it should set a cookie whose name is session ID and the value is this particular unique ID. The path is examples, and it's a HTTP only cookie, so it will not get sent to a HTTPS site if it is there. So ultimately a session is just a cookie, but we do make a distinction there. So because we want to distinguish between cookies which are used for other purposes. For example, one cookie can be just a tracking cookie which stays around and helps you know that it's the same person, whereas a session might be temporary. For example, banks will often log you out, as they say, after certain amount of time has elapsed for security's sake. So the thing that determines how long you are in and whether you are logged in and whether you are logged out is what is the job of a session. But a session is just a specific kind of cookie. It's merely managed differently from other cookies, which might, for instance, be login cookies, which say that this person logged in. So let's see what happens. So we have attribute 1 and the value is v1, and if we submit this guy, let us make sure this is our, then what we see is, first of all, the session ID is put here as well, but in addition to that, it is also getting sent. Moreover, the earlier cookies C1, C2, C3 are different, and the session ID is just these things. Plus, we need information about where this particular data is being kept, and that it can choose to store that information in a way that we will see when we look at the code of that application. Okay. So here we are as far as this is concerned, and here the request method was post. If you look at what was sent, it sent these two guys. So data name and data value, and those are basically the names of the form. Just to confirm that, we can look at it like this, and you will see data name and data value, data name and data value in both the forms. This is what we sent. That got sent to the server as part of the request, and then as part of the response, it sent back these headers and this information, which it baked into the page itself. So for example, this string was generated by the server, and this time what is called the session data is something that is not remembered by the browser, but it is remembered by the server. So here is what is happening. There is a cookie. A cookie is a general purpose mechanism to store data across pages. One particular kind of cookie is called a session ID, and you can store data in a session, which means that the server will try to remember for you some data, where it may put it in a file, or it may store it in a database, or it may store it in any other persistent container, and that data will be accessible when you give it this particular session key. So session data acts like a key value pair on the server side, and cookies act as key value pairs on the client side. And the client does the job of remembering the client side cookies, whereas the server will do the job of remembering server side information. For all browsers, cookies is a standard mechanism, whereas a session, technically speaking, is nothing that is specified by anything in the HTTP standard. It is something, it is a decent enough practice that was invented by people who wanted to program applications with sessions. Let's take a look at a different example of this. So I'm going to visit this site. It's called Lambda the Ultimate. It's a programming language discussion site. Let's start a watcher over here. Lambda the ultimate.org. And here, if you look, there is a cookie that gets set called PHP session ID. So this Drupal, etc. are PHP programs that are written to create this site, and they generate these kinds of session ID cookies. So here it is clear. The header is cookie, the name of the cookie is session ID, and this system will remember something about our session on the server side. So that's the overall structure. Okay, so far we have had our first look at the idea of cookies and session IDs, and now let's take a look at the details of how it is done. What we know so far, we can actually summarize on this page. Just to put it together, let's say we have this, and we are saying summary of cookies and sessions, right? So what we learned is that a cookie is also a header, It is the server tells the browser to set a cookie, and browser remembers to send the cookie to the server if the path of the cookie is a part of the URL of the page. So that's the general idea. And a particular kind of particular kind is not right. A better way to say that is a particular use of cookies is called a session, and sessions are short-lived interactions, such as with a bank, which will log you out after some time. So that's our summary of cookies and sessions. Now let's take a look at the code for those things. So here we have servlet examples, and here we have the code for cookies. The core part of the code is as shown in Tomcat. This part we have already seen, the do, get, and receiving these servlet objects. And then here is the interesting part. What it says is it gets access to the body of the system as a print writer object, and from the print writer object it can get an array by using this function called request.getCookies, and it prints these things. And then if you have asked to set a cookie, then it gets one by saying request get parameter name, and once it gets that parameter name, it will get the second parameter, which is cookie value, and thus you get to set the cookie. Let's just look at what that code was talking about. So here we have our cookie, and if you look at the page source, view page source, what we have is this thing here, cookie name and cookie value parameters, which are form fields. And in this code, this cookie value and cookie name is exactly what we are getting. But this time, if you want to set a new cookie, you call this function add cookie, which actually creates that header we saw called set-cookie. Just to remind ourselves, let's do it. C5 V5 we have, see, you get set cookie C5 V5. How did this set cookie come about? It came about by means of this call called add a cookie. So this is the basic idea. You use these headers to set a cookie when requested by the server, and the browser will remember all the cookies that have been set so far for this particular path, where path is examples, here examples. So all the pages under examples, which includes all the servlets, will all get to see all of these cookies. So that's the basic idea of the code of the cookies. In a similar vein, let's see what the source code for sessions looks like. And here is what we have for sessions. We get, as for cookies, we get this get session information. And with every session, there is a session object that is created on the server side, which contains this kind of information, HTTP session, etc., etc. And currently the session object, once you have asked to create it, is just going to remain in memory, and when you create one, it automatically gets all these fields created, last accessed, etc., etc. To complete this discussion, besides this simplified code, let's take a quick look at the real code. So in the real code, the difference is that where this code focuses purely on the setting of the session, this code also has all the rest of the stuff, which is to generate this sort of a page, which happens when you actually execute the session, which we did before here like this. So all of this information, current session, etc., is contained in this guide, and the actual work of getting the data of the session and so on is done in these types of things. So get attribute names and has more elements, etc., etc. That's where the information is getting stored. Now, given a session, it is also possible to make it persist past a server reboot by storing it in a file or a database, etc. And much of this machinery is actually standard in Tomcat. Alright, now that we have seen the one important core idea, which is cookies, and how a specific way of treating cookies yields sessions, we now have machinery to try to implement this multi-page memory in our application. What is remaining is to understand how to get the forms to work, especially with the multiple buttons and so forth. And with that, we will have transitioned into the world of servlets and GUI like applications. Okay, see you for the next part later.